So go ahead and your name and then Dad's.
Okay, my name is James Gore. My dad's name was Chester Gore. He was part of Exhibit Supply from right during World War II on, and bought it out in 1960 and took it over from there, and I worked for him. I was slave labor. But yeah, it was a great thing to do though. Yeah.
Tell us about so your dad. Well, you were born when?
49. August 49. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me, I guess, about your first remembrances of the plant, and we're talking about it would be the 4218.
Their first with Electrosnap Corporation. Yeah, I used to like to go down there because they had a lot of people. They were working in the switch division plus the printing, because they did a lot of manual stuff back then. Signs and things that they did was also a lot of more hand painted, and or they would alter them or add things to how the stuff looked, and to make it more appearance friendly and stuff. But yeah, and I was probably at that point maybe 8 years old or something on my first visit, and then like I say, that would have been, oh gosh, in probably say 55, 56, something like that. But and incidentally, my uncle was a printer at a different place, and my dad was a printer pretty much at with Exhibit Supply.
So your dad, do you believe, started in?
He started with my grandpa, his dad, and that's where they both got started. They had a like a specialty shop where they would do cards, business cards. They did forms, they did receipts, they did because everything back then was more longhand, and you didn't have carbon copy and things like that. So they had that, and pretty well, I want to say, after the 20s, I think in that period, my dad, I think, worked for his dad for probably about 3-4 years, and the economy just fell apart, and the residual from it, everybody thought about, well, the 20s as being, the bad time, but it stuck around for years, and then my uncle and my dad wound up getting jobs at different printing places and stuff. But yeah, so that was interesting.
So what was the name of that business then?
I don't remember. It was just my grandpa had this. It was a little shop. Just one of the typical shops that would have been in Chicago. And all I want to say is I know they lived near Wood Street, or on Wood Street, and I think it was on one of the main drags right around there, one of the main streets in the Chicago area, and it was just literally a slot. I mean, one of these 20-foot wide, and that was it, and that was his print shop. My grandpa's anyhow, yeah.
So your dad, at that point, once his dad's printing business basically declined, he wanted to stay in the printing business.
Yeah, and that's when he went to Exhibit Supply. Yeah, right after that. Yeah.
Okay.
I think he had some little jobs in between, but none of them worked out. And of course, I wasn't there yet, but yeah, it was just one of those things. And my sister's actually 10 years older, so I know she went through 10 years older than me, but she went through a lot of that. So
you think it was 1947 that he started?
Yeah, probably. I want to say, it had to be about 47 when I think he went to work for Exhibit. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, it had to be before that because they were getting a deferment from World War II. And so he had to start there. It was probably right after my grandpa shut down his print place. Because I know then my uncle, which is Irv Gore, he went to work for a different printing place. And my dad, I think, went to work for Exhibit at that point.
So it might have been pre-war.
Yeah, right around that period, because I remember the Scuttlebutt, and then they made Electrosnap made switches for Bombay doors on several different aircrafts and stuff. So that gave anybody that worked there on that a deferment, pretty much. And it was Exhibit Supply and Electrosnap Corporation. So
that would make a lot of sense because with the wartime, a lot of factories converted to war production.
Yeah, everything they geared. Totally. I can remember the Scuttlebutt about, and my uncle, of course, he didn't get a deferment, so he fought in the war, but didn't have a hard time. I mean, he made it okay, and he wound up actually filming a lot of incidences, and because he had camera technology.
Wow.
So yeah, that was neat.
Okay. So exhibit your dad's working there, and on J. Frank Meyer. Did you ever meet him then?
Yeah, I remember meeting the boss. You know, I'd be led over to the office as a kid, and yes, and he was the owner, of course. And yeah, it was always a nice feeling. There was always a lot of people there, and Electrosnap because of the switch part of it, and it was all like in one building. That was, you had a divider like entrance, a couple of them that you went through. And the one side was Electrosnap, the other side was the printing and card vending and forms. They did still a lot of forms, specialized, you know, receipt forms and all kinds of different things. And so they had letter presses plus the big Mealy 41 that they ran. Yeah.
Did they? Because I know in the very early origins of Exhibit Supply, they're doing some carnival games, and they were doing a lot of printing of tickets and
Right.
things like that.
Right. Yeah. You know, I remember a lot of that. I had no idea what it was, you know, because me being, you know, 7, 8, 9 years old, you're like, okay, yeah, the thing I was interested in was the Bathing Beauties, you know, the card series. Yeah.
So that the card series, do you know how many they printed over the years?
You know, not at the old exhibit, but I know that after the war, things did pick up. I mean, it took a little bit. But I know that a lot of their cards, and it was all novelty stuff pretty much, took off. I mean, amusement parks were growing all over the country, and ones that had been in existence that tried to stay afloat, a lot of them went out of business, but then it opened a whole new field because I remember our mailings, like when my dad had bought the business, it was all over the east to the Midwest. And even as far south as Louisiana, Florida, you know, and all up and down the East Coast pretty much. You know, I can remember a lot of the names that, you know, had to do with their location as far as the parks and recreational stuff, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, they had the conventions frequently, and you mentioned about
Yeah. Yeah, I'd always know because they'd go to some very fancy hotel down in downtown Chicago, and hundreds of people would be there, so yeah.
Right.
And where'd you sit? Well, it's that little circle in the on the photograph.
Yeah. International Mutoscope did a lot of card vending into the 40s.
Yeah, excuse me for a second.